Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Earrings Off. We want to invite you to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. You can find us on Facebook at Earrings Off Podcast and on Instagram at The Earrings Off Podcast.
Welcome to Earrings Off. I'm Lou.
And I'm Teresa. Let's get started.
Good morning. We have with us noted author Stacy Hawkins Adams. We are thrilled to have her here with us. To say that she is quite an author and wordsmith and just great communicator is an understatement. So we look forward to the discussion today, to our conversation today. Welcome, Stacy.
I'm honored to be here.
All right, we're good. We're gonna jump right in. Stacy, so you tell us a little bit. Teresa and I, of course, know you, and we're impressed. But we want you to introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm Stacy Hawkins Adams. As you said, I'm a longtime author, journalist, essayist, I like to say. I'm one of those lucky people who found out in childhood what my purpose was, which is centered around writing. And we can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I started writing when I learned how to read, like at age 5 or 6.
Wow.
And I've always had this deep desire to be a writer, and that morphed into a journalism career because, once you kind of start talking about careers, they start talking about starving artists and how you're going to survive. So I was like, I don't want to be that, but I want to write. So I discovered journalism. So I was a newspaper reporter for about 15 years full time before I morphed into doing author life full time. I now do marketing and communications work as well. But I've written 11 books in the past 16 years. My first novel came out in 2004. I write women's fiction. My nonfiction work, my journalistic work has tended to be focused on social issues and women's issues. And then I do some inspirational writing that was part journalism because it started I wrote an inspirational column for about 6 years for the Richmond Times-Dispatch before I kind of morphed into doing it on my own now through my social media and my other writing. So that's the long answer to kind of who I am. But yeah, definitely we could even just say multi-faceted writer.
Stacy, tell me a little bit though about, you said you discovered that when you were a child. How did that look or play out when you were little in terms of you writing?
So I grew up in Arkansas. I'm a native Arkansan, but I've lived in Virginia for about 26 years now. But I am the very youngest of 5 children. And so my siblings, all 4, were old enough to be my parents. I was one of those surprises. So my eldest sister is 25 years older than me, and the baby of the family was a senior in high school when I was born.
You were a surprise.
Very much a surprise. I'll tell them I was a pleasant surprise. So when I literally, like I said, I started learning how to read and write, and I had these older siblings, and my eldest sister was in graduate school when I was like in kindergarten and first grade. And so I would write these short stories and these poems, and I was a voracious reader as well. So I would read a poem, a book of poetry, and then I want to go write poems, or I'd read a story for school or something, and I'd come home and want to write a story. So I was writing these short stories and these poems. And so that was back in the days of typewriters. And my eldest sister would take my poetry and my writing and type it up, and she'd staple it and give it back to me and say, here's your first book. You're an author. Here's your book. So that seed was planted. And so and then, like I said, I grew up in Arkansas in a city called Pine Bluff, about 60,000 people. And for people who live in Virginia, I compared a little bit to the Petersburg to Richmond thing, because we were about 30 minutes from Little Rock. There's a small HBCU there. My sister actually ended up being a professor there. But anyway, so it was a small loving community. And so it started with my family giving me that kind of support, but then all of my teachers nurtured that in me, and the church I attended. And so if there were a special occasion, they would come to me and ask me to write a poem, or can you write a short story for this? So all of that was nurtured. And I think for me, the light bulb moment that, wow, this writing really is something that makes a huge difference happened in 5th grade. My 5th grade teacher, my homeroom teacher, Mrs. Jackson, I had written a poem about police officers of all things, which I actually still remember. It was very corny, but I wrote this poem about police officers, and I guess I clearly shared it with her. And unbeknownst to me, she sent it to the local police station, to the police chief. And I got a letter in the mail. It came in the mail, and it had like written the Pine Bluff Police Department. And my brother, I have one brother out of the 5 siblings, 3 sisters and a brother. My brother was coming by the house that day, and he checked the mail, and he brought the mail, and he was like, "What have you done? Are you in trouble? Like, why are you getting mail from the police department?" But it was a letter from the police chief, Bobby Norman, saying that he had received this poem, and it meant so much for them to know that the police officers were meaningful. He had framed it and put it in the lobby of the police station. And, you know, I'm like this googly-eyed, like 11-year-old, like, wow. But that was like my true light bulb moment, that it wasn't just my friends and family being nice to me because I like to write, and they were supporting me like, okay, this can really have an impact. And so I think from there, I mean, I had always said I wanted to write books. In 3rd grade, I tried to write my first novel. I still have that handwritten jumble of stuff. But that was really a moment that said, okay, this writing thing is something to really look into. And then I didn't realize at that age I'd be a journalist, but it totally has played out in my journalism and even in my novel writing.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow. That's
what a great story.
I just have to add, just for folks, that when Teresa and I were planning this journey with Earrings Off and didn't quite know what we were doing, Stacy also served as a coach in different areas of communication. And so we called Stacy to run our ideas by her to see what she thought, see where we were off track. And so she was instrumental in that. So we appreciate that. And that's another service that you offer. And we can vouch that it was top notch and helped us stay on the right path. So I wanted to share that.
Well, thank you. And I think that for me, like, you know, I know we'll talk a little bit later about purpose, but for me, I've come to realize that that's really just an extension of storytelling. So that's a way of me helping other people tell their stories or get their message out, because like you all had a vision. And so sometimes you just need to know how to articulate that vision. And even in my day job, I call it, where I'm doing strategic communications for my employer, it's really how do we tell this story in a way that's going to resonate with the people we're trying to reach.
Yeah.
Tell us the motivation behind Watercolored Pearls.
Okay. So actually, Watercolor Pearls was like my 3rd book out of the 11, and it was first back in 2007. It was the 3rd book in a 3-book series that was set in Richmond. And so what you may be referring to is like, if you look on Amazon, you'll see the original title was like a blue title or something like that. That was the original book. And so when that book went out, when those 3 books went out of print with my publisher, as books will do as they get older, I actually was able to buy the rights back to it. I was like excited about it. I'm like, someday Oprah's gonna call and this is and I'll be ready. So I republished Watercolor Pearls with the brownish gold color with the necklace, and that's why it's the anniversary edition. And but still, I love that we're talking about this book, because one of the reasons I chose that book to be the first that I kind of reprinted on my own was because it's one of the books that has resonated. It's like timeless. People are still finding that book, and like I randomly, as authors do, I randomly go and check my reviews. I try not to look at them all the time. Yeah. But it really is meaningful to see that someone read Watercolor Pearls in 2019 or 2020 when that book was written in 2006, 2007, because those themes are timeless. So when you ask what kind of led to this book, like I said, it was the 3rd in a series, and the series dealt with these 3 women friends on different journeys of growth. And how I landed on Watercolor Pearls is because I wanted to bring together really just kind of like what their lives were like, how it was messy. You know, it's messy. Life is messy. Like, we're in a pandemic. Life is messy. Yeah. And so each of these friends, they were trying to love and support each other, but they were dealing with their own personal struggles. Like, Serena's the main character. She's married to a minister. There are these women that are kind of coming after him. She's just had these 2 kids. She's not feeling her most beautiful. The kids are 2-year-old twin boys, and you know what a 2-year-old is like anyway. She's kind of put her career on the shelf. So she's dealing with all of that, not feeling secure about herself. And then you have Erica, who is her best friend from college, and Erica left an abusive marriage in the prior book. And in this book, she's got a chance at a new life with a great person, but she's just found her faith, because in the previous book, she was atheist. So after leaving her husband and living in a shelter in the previous book, she finally found her way to faith. And so now she's like this gung-ho person of faith. And she's like, I got to follow everything in the Bible by the letter. And it says God hates her. So then her estranged husband, who was abusing her, comes back. And now she's wrestling with, do I need to follow the Bible to the T? Or can I really start fresh and have a meaningful, healthy life and relationship? And then the 3rd young lady, Tawana, in the very first book, she's a 16-year-old teen mom. And Serena, the first woman I mentioned, mentored her through that, helped her get into college. And Tawana's now at Harvard Law School. You would think that the world is her oyster. She's coming back to Richmond for the summer to do an internship at a prestigious law firm, but her insecurity is off the charts because she's the only one in her law school class with a 7-year-old child. She's a single mother. She's ashamed that her name is Tawana because she feels like that's a scarlet letter, you know. So all of that. So these three women. And so part of me wanting to write that was the long answer, which I'll give you, is that I know that my target audience is women. And so what I have found in writing the fiction and what I had found even at that juncture was that the fiction was really healing people. It was speaking to people. It was helping them, really look at their own lives and find ways to grow. My very first novel, Speak to My Heart, in which I introduced these three characters, a woman read that book about a year after it was published and emailed me out of the blue at 1 a.m. in the morning and said, I just finished this. I was thinking about killing myself. And this book has shown me that I need to go back to church and, deal with some things in my life and get help. So I was hearing that kind of stuff. So as I was writing Watercolored Pearls, I knew I wanted to write about women who didn't have life perfect. Being a person of faith doesn't mean that you have it all together. So what I've also come to realize as a writer, and I had realized at that point, was that even though I write inspirational or faith-based fiction, I'm not ever going to probably write the cookie cutter, preachy stories. I'm always going to write about somebody who's running away from God or struggling with faith, or maybe they're a person of faith like Serena because she's married to a minister, but she doesn't have it all together either because she's human and she's got to be reminded of some of those things. And for me, that's kind of like the ministry of what I do. And so that's kind of what Watercolored Pearls is. You see all of this going on. And then there's this older woman, Charlotte, that the three ladies take a road trip to visit in DC. She's being honored at the ceremony. And they get there early and they're having dinner with her. She's a wise woman. She sees, they don't tell her everything, but she sees enough to know that they're struggling in their own way. So the next morning they wake up and she's got a bag of pearls, multicolored pearls, next to each of their places at breakfast. And she tells them her story. And she says, yeah, I'm getting an award today. You all came to celebrate me. But let me tell you about the time that I was homeless. Let me tell you about the time I was struggling with my kids. She takes them through all of her messy stages in life and say, but now I'm getting this award because now I'm at the pearl stage and I'm being honored. And you all are exactly where you're supposed to be, and all you're doing, you're just on that journey to becoming a pearl. So I felt like I needed to tell that story, and this is the first book of really probably the only ones. I don't think I've done it since, but when I was writing this book and I was telling some of these stories, I was crying, and I'm like, it's fictional. I made these people up. Why am I crying? But to me, that was the muse speaking through me, and it was I left my heart on the page, and so it really means a lot that this is the story that resonates with people.
Wow. Okay. That is wonderful. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about women being pearls in progress. So, but talk to us a little bit about, when you talked about you writing when you were younger and your older sister noticing and women supporting women. Why is it important for women to mentor others? What is the value? Now, we're going to talk about first what's the value to the mentee, the person being mentored, and what's the value to the one actually doing the mentoring. Let's talk a bit about that.
Great question. Yeah, that theme shows up in probably every novel that I write. You'll see that there's an older woman mentoring a younger woman. Like I mentioned, Serena was mentoring the teenage Tawana initially, but then Serena had Charlotte, and then there's another touch point in Watercolored Pearls where she's walking down the street with the twins and strollers, and an older woman she used to work with is like, I'm retired now. You need help with those babies. Let me take those babies so you can take a nap sometimes. And Serena, takes a deep breath and she's like, I need to do that. So the value to, you said the mentee first, I feel because I had 3 older sisters and I've always had older women mentors even in my career. I feel like it's like a guiding light in a way. You know, we don't have to do life alone. I think as Americans, for sure, in our culture, it's all about I got mine, you get yours. It's very much an independent-minded society. But if you look at other cultures and in other worlds, they're very much more about let's do this as a family. Let's be on this journey together. And so for me, I feel like any of the successes I've had have been through people mentoring me. My fifth grade teacher, Miss Jackson, that was her acting as a mentor to share my gift with the police chief. And that's happened throughout my life. My fourth grade teacher let me write the class play that was going to be performed in front of the whole school, like stuff like that. But yeah, just having other women, you know, that I could go to and ask questions of, whether it's a professional thing or something personal, or even in raising my children, I've had, you know, friends from church who they were a little bit farther along. And like, I remember when my daughter was 16 and driving me crazy, a friend whose daughter was 21 said, oh, you know, she's in the alien stage. You don't even have to like her right now. About 18 or 19, she's going to come back. You just stand fast.
Yeah.
And I give that advice to other women because it was so true.
Oh,
so
it's
the mentee.
Yeah, when you're in it, though, you just don't see that. It's hard.
It's like, woo, yeah. So I think for the mentee, it gives that person hope. It lets them know that there's nothing wrong with them. Other people have gone through this too, and that they can be encouraged to move forward. Yeah. And then for the mentor, I mean, certainly that cliche of paying it back or, you know, or paying it forward, you know, right. You're getting this opportunity to encourage and help somebody else along the way. So like, I think about that. You talked about my marketing coaching, and I do the writer coaching as well. And so I tallied last year, at least 12 of my clients or my mentees have gone on to publish books. Most of them have self-published, 2 have traditionally published. But every time they publish a book, like, my chest is puffed out. So it's like, I'm like proud of them. Like, you know, I'm the midwife or something. So I feel like there's some beauty and power in watching other people soar and do their thing, you know. And so that's where the mentor can, you know, feel like they've done their role well.
Well, and I can appreciate that, because with me having managed teams, when somebody that I've managed years later gets a big promotion or I see them in the news, I'm just like you, like, yeah, wow, I had a part in that.
Right.
And you just feel, I'm humbled by how far they've gone in their careers, and to know that I was in the developmental stages of that. So yeah, I get that.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Stacy, you've been really blessed to come to know at an early age what your purpose, and then have that developed with your community, your teachers and your sisters. For a person who's trying to discover that purpose, in your opinion, is there interplay between looking to the past and discovering what your purpose is? How would you advise someone who's trying to figure it all out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I'm still discovering my purpose in some ways. I know the foundation of it is the writing, and I think that it can shift in different seasons. So I have 2 answers to that. So I think for people who are seeking and they feel like they have no idea, I absolutely agree that you should go back to your past. And like the experts will say, look back at when you were 8 years old, or when you were in 3rd grade. What did you say you want to be when you were in 3rd grade? Because when you're a child, you're pure and you're open, and you don't have any of these things saying you can't do that or don't do that, or what are people going to think? So you go back and look at that 3rd grade person that you were. That's where that purest form of your purpose is. Whether it was just like, well, I talked a lot. Oh, I was meant to be a lawyer. Or I, jumped rope. Oh, that's why I want to be a personal trainer. So you kind of look back at that. And I tell parents that too. For years, for about 10 years, I wrote a parenting column for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, which ended in 2018. And some of the experts that I talked to around the country would say that parents should look at their kids in that way. Like, yes, you might have a child who's a natural athlete, but maybe put that kid in dance too, or let that kid try music, because they may not know what their true passion is until they see it. Like, for example, my son didn't realize, he didn't run track until 8th grade. And we thought he loved soccer and he was fast in football. When he got into track, my introverted child that never talked just was like, whoosh, this whole other person came out. And I was like, wow, that's it. That's the seed right there. So yeah, I would say certainly look back at childhood, but then look at those touch points like I saw with my son, like when that thing happened.
Yeah.
Like a passion. And my family, my siblings would tell you that I was extremely shy as a child. Like, I'm talking y'all's ears off now. They're like, you probably didn't start talking till you were 5. But let me start talking about like the writing or something like that. And that's my passion. And so it flows. Right. So I think that's part of how you discovered. And then what I was saying about the seasons about it, I would say even with myself, I started with the journalism career when I graduated college at 22, and then right around ages 27, 28, I feel like a lot of young adults, and I'm like, this is normal, like to have an early life crisis. But I didn't realize that when I was 27 and 28, and I was like, am I doing the right thing with my life? Like, what's going on? You know, it was like this weird thing. But as I've seen other 20-somethings hit that, I'm like, oh, you're just having your early life crisis. You're like, you're just, you know, at the right place to figure out, is this your purpose and what are you meant to do? But when I hit that point, that's when I realized I need to go back to writing fiction, because that's where my heart is. So even if I've got to like get up at 4 a.m. in the morning or whatever, and it was 5 years before my first novel came out, but I kind of started thinking about it and working toward it and going to writers' conferences at age 27. And so even with that, my last novel that came out was Finding Home, which came out in 2016. And around that time, my daughter had just gone to college. My son was entering 9th grade. And I realized, wow, I've got like 4 years with this young man. I don't want these next 4 years to be a blip because I'm in my writing cave or I'm off at a book signing when I should be at one of these events. So I purposely decided I need to like not write fiction. I can do my nonfiction, but I'm not going to try to write a novel until he leaves so I can be all in. And when he goes off, I'll be fine. And I'm fine. So for me, that was like understanding my purpose in that season was to make sure I was the best mother I needed to be. So then when I come back to this season of writing, I can give my all there. And I just say that because I do write for women. I do hear from women who say, well, I had a purpose, but now I got to do this or that. So I think it can happen in seasons. And I would say ultimately just through prayer and, you know, a lot of, I guess introspection, self-examination, reading and all of that, and journaling, which I know we'll talk about, I ultimately realized that my purpose is really to be an encourager. And so the way my purpose is showcased is through the writing, through that gift of writing, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, inspiration. But then I can have a conversation with a mentee and give them what they need. And that's still part of my purpose too.
Wow. Okay.
So,
very good.
And you're right. Your words are so encouraging. I think that's at your core. It just comes across when I read what you've written, and I'm inspired by that. But in the midst of, say, we're in this pandemic and with so much going on, the social unrest, the reality of the police brutality, the economic stressors, everything that's going on right now. What do you do to manage the stress and experience joy? How do you manage that through all of this and you're still able to express joy and encourage others through your writings, through your gift?
Gosh, for me, I think it really is about like setting boundaries around self-care. That's something that I've journeyed toward. I wouldn't say that when I was in my 20s or 30s, I would have known to do that, but life experiences teach you that. And because I did realize that the writing was a purposeful piece of helping other people heal, then that's healing to me to know that when I put something out there, like yesterday morning, I wrote about 9/11. Like, I don't ever just like say, oh, let me just write something because it's 9/11. I'm literally like, I'll have my morning meditation and usually prayer, and then I'll sit and think about, what things mean to me. And literally when I'm writing something for my social media post, I'm truly writing from my heart. I'm like writing to the reader, but I'm also writing to myself. So it's like this mutual, it's like a conversation with myself and God. And then I'm sharing that with the world because I think, okay, they must need to hear this too. So for me, it's definitely making sure that I get enough sleep. I try to like surround myself with positive people. Like I said, the prayer and the meditation is important for me. But I would say for me, like when you ask, like, how am I able to do that? Like my life experiences, like my mother passed away in 2005 and we were very close. And so I think journeying through the grief of that loss, and then one of my 4 siblings, she's since passed away. She passed away in 2015. But in 2011, she was living with sarcoidosis. And in 2011, she had a double lung transplant. Well, actually, I should say before that, in 2009, while she was living with sarcoidosis, she had a massive heart attack. And the good thing is she was in the hospital because of the sarcoidosis. So they already had her hooked up to the oxygen when she had the heart attack. And so they worked on her for 40 minutes, but she spent like 6 weeks in a coma. And we thought she was not going to make it. And I remember I was at a writers conference in Florida, in Tampa, Florida. It was the summer of 2009, I guess. It was that summer. And my eldest sister called and said, I have someone on the phone and she wants to speak to you, because if she was in the coma, they transferred her to a nursing facility. They didn't think she was going to make it. And so she had woken up, but she had a tracheotomy and couldn't talk. And so that day she called and she was like, hi, Stacy. I was like, oh my gosh, you're talking again. And so like she had to learn how to walk again. She had to get her voice back. When she left that facility, they were like, we're taking your picture because you're our miracle. So that was 2009. 2011, she had a double lung transplant and she never fully recovered. So for me, a lot of what you see is the peace and the calm. It's me just feeling like I was living for her too. It was like she never like got back to be that vibrant, independent woman. So I was like, well, I'm not going to take my life for granted. I'm going to live in a way that every single day is a blessing, and I'm doing it in honor to her, even while she was living. But it's also to let my life be that gift. So like, whatever the future holds, each day there's a gift there. So it sounds cliche, but I feel like just because of those life experiences and those losses, it really has helped me appreciate that, we do have something to give to the world. So we got to find a way to do that despite what's swirling around us.
Wow. And I tell you, thank you for sharing that, because I agree with that. I do the same thing with my mom that's passed. I try to live to honor her and not take life for granted. But I of course follow you on social media, and every time you put something, I want to comment, but I don't want you to think I'm stalking.
No, you are fine.
I don't comment all the time. It's like, okay, hold back, Luce. Something.
No, you're good.
But you wrote one recently about the actor that passed, Chadwick.
Yes.
Your words were, they were profound. The way you expressed that we don't have to put everything on social media.
Mm-hmm.
People are quietly being heroes. That's what you were saying about the way he conducted himself. And so your words, they just speak to me. And just when you say that, that's a way for you to give back to people, I can see that in your writing, because it bolsters people and it gives them some hope and some joy. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'll say one of the reasons I do that is because when I was still at the Times-Dispatch, I wrote an inspirational column. It was called Inspirations every Saturday from 2000 to 2006. And it ultimately became like the number one reason people said they were buying the Saturday paper. They had done like this whole focus group thing. But when I wrote my final column in February 2006, as I was taking this leap of faith to go write books full time, I wrote this final column, and I was getting emails and letters from people, and I had heard from readers, clearly if they're saying it's a popular thing, I've been hearing from people while I was writing, and that meant a lot. But when I was saying goodbye, I heard from people who were like, I'm Jewish, and I read this every Saturday, or I'm an atheist, but something is calling me to this. And people were just saying how healing it was to have, and I wouldn't always write my personal stories. I'd interview other people and all of that. So that's one of the reasons I started to do this on social media, because I knew the column was ending, but I also knew that method of communicating with people was making a difference. And so that's why I tried to continue it.
Well,
you mentioned briefly journaling. Do you recommend it? If so, is there a particular style of journaling? Does that help you with your books? How do you use journaling?
I would say yes for journaling. I think it can be used in multiple ways. I think if you're a person who doesn't consider yourself a writer, but even if you're just stressed out about the pandemic, go get a pretty journal from whatever store. I'm a journal junkie. I have all kinds of journals, and my daughter's like, are you buying another one? And you got like 5 over there with like 2 pages. I'm like, but they're so pretty. So get you something pretty. I say pretty, or you're a gentleman, doesn't have to like be all flowery. But I think if you are like a person who's anxious or something's worrying you, there's something about writing, like the hand to paper release. I would say write down your frustrations, write down your fears, write down your hopes and your dreams. There's something about getting it out of yourself. You might talk to a friend about it, but putting it on paper, something about that releases you. It's almost therapeutic in a way, because if you allow yourself to just write and not be worried about somebody reading it, or like, am I using the proper grammar? Because usually my journals are a hot mess. Like I can go back and I'm like, what was I trying to say? Because I'm writing so fast. I'm trying to like write as fast as I'm thinking. You can't always see. So I would say that's a great place. And for me, just during whatever trying times in my life, I would sometimes just write letters to God. I'd be like, dear God, I don't understand this, or I'm frustrated by this, but this is how I'm feeling. I know this is what you said, but let me tell you, this one is still making me. So that would be like my conversation with God in the journal. So you could use it that way. If you're a writer, I often tell my writing students to free write. So when you free write, it's pretty much the same method. You're just picking up the journal and you're like, okay, I'm supposed to be writing about these characters in Watercolor Pearls, but I don't even know what Serena's problem is. I don't know what I wanted to say. But the more you, like if you say, I'm going to write for 10 minutes and I'm not going to stop as a free writer, usually you're going to say something in that, like, well, I know she lives in Texas and da-da-da-da, she lost this or that, but maybe she's going to go visit her friend Charlotte, and maybe Charlotte will tell her the truth. Like that unfolds, and you go back and you read it later, like, oh, yeah, I actually can make that happen in the book. So for writers, the free writing in your journal kind of activates your creativity. And then I also have a vision journal. So a lot of people have vision boards where they like put the photos up. I actually have a journal where I have like my photos, I have my goals, I have the things that I wish and desire. I have, just little notes and pictures. Like I've got the picture of South Africa. I'm like, I've sent my daughter. I haven't been yet. I need to get to Cape Town. So like I have a picture of that there in my vision journal. So you can use it that way as well. So I would say any way that serves your purpose. So like, since I have so many, I've got like one of each. I got the journal where I said my little prayer journal. I've got the vision journal. I've got the free writing journal when I'm working on my new book, because I am working on a new novel. So I'm trying to figure out who those characters are. So yeah, in any way, it's just something about the not sitting at the computer and writing it, but having a pen or pencil and then putting that to paper. It activates a part of your brain that allows you to kind of like, it's therapeutic to your brain.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually do like to journal, and I have books all over the place too that I'll start in and I'll stop in. But you're right, there is something very therapeutic about putting that pen to paper. And I actually even take the time to pick out special pens, because even with the different styles of pen, like the ink gel or the fine point or the medium point. And I think somehow it kind of translates the mood also, because I can look at it and say, or even with the different colors, it's therapeutic. I never thought of it in terms of it being therapeutic until you said that, but that's exactly what it is.
Stacey, seriously, you have exhausted me with all of these different things you are doing. I don't even know how you're keeping all of this. Oh my goodness.
Everybody says that to me. I don't do it all. Everybody has said that to me for years, because when my first two books came out, my first two, I was working full time at the Times Dispatch. My kids were 6 and 3 when my first book came out. I was married. My husband at the time was in grad school. So people ask me, I don't do it all at the same time. It looks like I do it all at the same time, but I don't do it all at the same time.
I was looking forward to you, quite honestly, looking forward to talking to you, because I thought, okay, I'm going to listen to her and I'll learn something. But now you just exhausted me. Now I feel worse than when I started this interview. Okay.
But let's look at it like this. Okay, so when I'm writing the novels, I'm typically not writer coaching. So for example, like especially because of the pandemic, I didn't do I do summer writing classes. So I was going to teach at VMFA this summer, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. I was going to teach at Lewis Ginter. And so that was going to be my writing classes, but I didn't, and I still technically could have transferred those online. Well, I decided not to do that because I do some book editing too. But now I'm in the phase of, I'm kind of like weaning out the book editing. I'm not going to do the writer coaching for a while because I'm planning to write a new novel. And I actually have had conversations with 3 people in the past week where I'm like, sorry, I can't edit your project until maybe late 2021 because I'm focusing on my writing right now. I'm going to get this novel written. So I do things in stages and seasons. So like when I finish the novel, then I'll teach another writing class. So I just try to like pace myself.
Seriously, I'm impressed. But anyway, our last question today. You're an accomplished writer and coach in so many things, as we've already established. But what advice would you have for aspiring writers who may be intimidated at the thought of penning their first article, or blog, or book? What can you tell them to sort of spur them toward action rather than just thinking about it?
I would say just do it. I mentioned that I kind of started working on my first novel off and on when I was 27. I didn't really get serious about it until I was 30, like after I had my son. Because so for that 3-year period, I was that first time like author, fiction writer saying, I'm going to write a book. I'm writing a book. I'm going to write a book. And I would write 2 pages and I would put it down. I'd be like, that's not good enough. This isn't the right title. Something's not right. So I just kept like not committing to it. So I would say commit to it. Understand that even now working on my 12th book, the first version is just a mess. Like I say, hot mess. And so every author's first version is just brain dumping. And if you're writing the first article, the first draft is just brain dumping. You want to at least get something down on the page, so you can go back and put those puzzle pieces in place, make it all take shape and form and make sense. So I would say just write. And it's funny that you say that because one of my posts from this week, it's all flowing together. I wrote about how there was this deadline that was coming up. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to do it. It was a writing project. And I've been saying, I'm going to do this. And I actually kind of talked myself out of it. So I was having a conversation with my significant other, and it was literally like 8 p.m. that night. And I was like, I shouldn't even tell you this. But, I decided I'm not going to do this writing project because, like, what if it comes back? Or I'm not going to submit for it because what if they really want me to do it? Like, then I got to, like, figure out how to make it happen. And he was like, it is 8 o'clock. You're going to go meet that deadline because you don't know what's on the other side of the what if. You're a good writer. It's probably going to be better than like 10 other things they received. So go get it done. Goodbye. And I was like, okay. And so I finally leaned into it and I looked at what I had and I was like, it's kind of bad. That's how we all feel about our writing. I was like, I'm going to polish it a little bit. I'm going to write this cover letter. And literally when I finished, it was 11:59. I was like, I'm meeting the deadline. And I even said, this is humbly my drafted writing, not necessarily my best. I hope you'll consider it. But even if nothing happens, now I have a more polished 2 chapters because I needed to submit the 2 chapters. I have that a little bit more polished. I have this cover letter that I can use for other things. So even if that, piece doesn't fall into place, I still have something from it that'll be workable and usable. So even at my stage, I just want to encourage the beginning writers, you never feel like you have it all together. There are always going to be those moments of procrastination and a little bit of fear, like, is this the right thing? Should I do this? What if this? What if that? Don't worry about the what ifs. If you really have something in your heart that you want to write and you feel like you're meant to write, that means that there's someone somewhere in the world who needs to read that at some point. So they won't have their need met if you don't do your part. And that's kind of what I put myself to get my work done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Stacy, that's just great information, solid information that you've shared with our listeners today. And we thank you for that. And of course, if you have anything imparting you want to share, we are open to you doing that.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for having me. I love this podcast, and so I'm honored to be a guest on it. I think you all are doing amazing work. And I think my parting words will kind of just go back to what you were saying, like when you think about all the various things I do, like I do invite your listeners to visit my website, stacyhawkinsadams.com. But if you go there and you read the bio or you see the books, then you are sort of like, oh my gosh, she's done all these things. Well, keep in mind, I didn't do them all at once. So I feel like everyone's purpose has different seasons. And for me, throughout most of my writing career, my main thing was to be the best mother that I could be. And so now my kids are like 22 and 19. And so I feel like, okay, I've met the purpose in launching them into whatever their purpose is going to be. And I never wanted to like raise kids who then were like, well, my mom's a successful author, but I don't know her. I didn't want that. So since I did that well, now I'm ready for whatever this next stage or next chapter is going to be. But even with that, they saw my writing journey and they saw me volunteering a lot in the community and they saw me nurturing my friends and having mentors of my own and all those things that were meaningful to me. And so now they get to live it out in their own way, having had a role model to do that. So I say, don't feel like you have to set aside your purpose. Just realize that things happen in seasons and stages and be okay with understanding that and just be ready when that next season or stage comes.
Okay. That is excellent information. Thank you so much, Stacy. We've just enjoyed talking with you, and I knew we would. So, Stacy, take good care of yourself. Enjoy your Saturday.